you need to define what you want, what's important to you in your life. Even if you're not, if entrepreneurship or ownership is not in your cards, you have to define what's important to you in terms of your career. What does your career look like? What do you want to be able to do as you grow more and more skills in your career, and how does that provide for your family? What does your family look like? What does your personal life look like? I think it's important for anyone.
Welcome to Confessions of an Implementer. I'm your host, Ryan Hogan. We share unique stories of EOS implementers and the companies they've transformed to give you a rare glimpse into the successes and challenges of the system in action. Let's jump in. Well, thank you for coming. There's like so many topics to cover today, and I realize like this is kind of a short week for everybody, and so just the fact that you're taking time out of your day to come on and share some of your wisdom.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving week, by the way. So yeah, just want to put that out there.
It's gonna be awesome. And like for you as an expert implementer, because we have kind of varying degrees of implementers and experience and backgrounds, and one thing that I love about it is diversity. When I have the opportunity to bring on an expert implementer, there's just like there's so much that you've seen in the session room and in your life and growing up and everything else. And so there's just a lot of stuff. And one of the things that we had talked about earlier, when we did a pre-call maybe about a month or two ago, was like how you see businesses and how that correlates to like a body and all these other things. So long-winded, I'm really excited about this. What just to start off, like how did you get here? Because you have a very interesting kind of career trajectory where it was like accounting, and then like big time accounting, and then like CFO level and smaller, and then entrepreneurialism. Like where did all of this start?
Yeah, it was quite a journey. And by the way, you've had some great guests here, so I'm very privileged to be part of that your guest list here. But yeah, my journey, I I always wondered what God was preparing me for, because I was very wide in my experience, but not very deep in it. So as you mentioned, I started out in public accounting, so I got my master's in professional accounting at UT. Which, by the way, hopefully they beat the Aggies this Friday, so we're going to the game. But anyway, so got my master's in professional accounting, went straight into public accounting. My dad is an accountant, so he had his own little a small private practice, and so I went into accounting and worked for Arthur Anderson up in Dallas, and I stayed in public accounting for about 5 years, and that's where I really felt like I got grounded in just the business world, because I was in audit. I didn't do taxes, and audit really allows you to understand the business, because you audit the financial statements and you have to make sense of the financial statements. Okay, operationally, how do these numbers flow to the financial statements when you have to do these things in operations? And so we actually get to learn about the business, ask questions operationally, sales and marketing, operations, financially. So it really gave me a good foundation of just understanding business. But anytime I meet people and I told them, yeah, I'm a CPA, I'm an accountant, they look at me like, what? Oh, you don't have the personality of a CPA. So, and so I knew I was just getting the experience, and because I didn't see myself as partner material, and staying in that industry forever, right? I wanted to get the experience and eventually do something with it. Didn't know what that was, but leadership always interested me. And so when I left accounting, because I would work with different audit engagements, and there are different managers, different teams, and so I'd always study kind of my managers and the partners that I was working with, and I loved seeing their style and what was effective, what wasn't effective. And so when I started supervising people, I tried to use the best practices that I saw. So when I left public accounting, I actually uh, went to a regional firm in Austin. So I was in Dallas, then I went to a regional CPA firm in Austin, and then that's when I got into more consulting work, so audit and consulting. And then I left there and went to Dell Computers, and that's where I really kind of dove further into the finance role. So Dell Computers up in Austin, and then in between Dell and Applied Materials, I got burned out. I felt like, I saw a lot of good people leave, and it went back to leadership, because this whole thread of leadership in my head was, great leaders retain people, right? And I saw a lot of people leaving, a lot of talent leaving Dell and big companies, because I worked for big companies, and so I wanted to start my own business. And that was my first dip in entrepreneurship. Was I started Eventerprise, and it was an event management company because my whole goal was to help retain employees through events. And eventually, I wanted to get to the leadership executive retreat level where I would be doing training workshops with executives to help them retain employees. And that was in the late 90s. And during that time, in Austin, it was the .com, right? .com era. And so there's a lot of companies that were doing a lot of special events to help retain employees, the quarterly events. And that's what I did. I helped organize those things until the .com burst. And so once it burst, I had to get back into the workplace, and so my business, my clients kind of shriveled up, the budgets kind of shriveled, and so I started working again in big corporate applied materials, and that's where I started blending finance and operational roles together because I was in a specific group that really looked at on the financial side, but also operationally, how could we be more efficient? Um, and again, I got burned out after that, so I started working for smaller businesses, which is really where I felt like I was more called to do because my dad worked with smaller companies in his practice. And by the way, my dad's the oldest out of 12 kids, and so I have a lot of aunts and uncles, and they're very entrepreneurial. In the Philippines, you have to be entrepreneurial because to make a living in the Philippines, you kind of have to figure out a way to make your own living. And so they're very entrepreneurial. So I think I got that from my dad. And so after applied materials, I started working for the smaller mid-sized businesses. And I was the integrator, if you will, before the integrator became a term, right? So I worked directly with the owners. I kind of wore all the different hats, kind of integrated all the different functions. And that's really where I fell in love with just working with small to mid-sized businesses, really creating that culture, growing it, making the impact that I can see through my own like efforts instead of just being a little cog in a big business. And that's where to the point where I wanted, and I already took a dip my toe in entrepreneurship, so eventually I wanted to do that again. And so when we moved from Austin to San Antonio, I took a job here, unfortunately, but fortunately it didn't work out, right? So I ended up getting fired, and I was wondering, okay, man, what am I going to do here? My network's in Austin, and we're here now in San Antonio. We just had our first child. And so that's when I really had a soul searching and really trying to understand, okay, what am I really good at, and what am I passionate about, and what are all my experiences have led me up to this point. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to buy a franchise. Okay, I bought the alternative board in 2010, which is a peer group model, right? And I think you're familiar. You were in Vistage, so it's Vistage, YPO, C12. So it's that peer group model, and I bought that in 2010, and I loved working with the owners, and in essence, I had it for 5 years until I introduced EOS into my kind of my service lines, because when I was working with the owners for about 5 years, I still saw them struggle with implementation of strategy and the whole organization. And so I was actually creating my own model because I didn't see anything I liked until I read the book Traction. Someone gave me the book Traction. It's like, oh, it's all there. All the philosophies and all the things that I've been using are all consistent with what Gino has described. And so in 2015 is when I became an EOS implementer. So it's been 10 years since August that I've been an implementer. And I love absolutely what I do. I do feel like this is my calling. I get to serve in a way that I love.
10 years puts you in like OG territory. You know that, right?
I just listened to your podcast interview with CJ and then Dan Wallace. Yeah, they're OG. And by the way, I thought OG was like old guard. I didn't know it was like original gangsters. I didn't know what that meant really. So
That's when you were kind of growing up, and it sounds like you had not just the entrepreneurial itch, but you were living it. So like an entrepreneurial family, and you saw this when you went directly into kind of big consulting. Was that is it retrospect to look at that and say like that helped me build the credentials to get where I'm at, or like when you graduated were you like, hey, these are the skill sets that I need to build, and like these are the enterprises in which I'm going to build those skill sets to accomplish that? um it, was it intentional?
yes and no. I mean, I had no idea I was going to start a business and have a leadership development company, right? So, um, but I knew that I was going to just take some steps to get the experience that I want based on what I'm really good at, and I just chose to start in accounting because that was my degree, and my dad was a CPA, and so it just naturally fit. I said, okay, maybe that's what I'm supposed to do, and then from there I'll figure it out along the way. And I just knew that because when my dad really has just instilled a strong work ethic in me. He left the Philippines. I was born in the Philippines. I left when I was 5 there. But when I was 4, he left on his own to get established in the U.S. and he brought us a year later. And I've just seen him work so hard to fulfill the American dream that he wants for his family, which I'm the beneficiary of. And so I've, I've seen what dedication and what entrepreneurship can do to families, to individuals, and from there, that's why I thought, okay, public accounting is where I'm going to start, but I know there's something bigger that God's planning for me. I just didn't know what that was, so I was just being obedient and just taking steps towards, doing the best I can in the places I work, because I only lasted about 3 years in each of the companies I was in, and just doing my best, and doors would open and close and things like that. So it's just worked out that way. But I do feel like it gave me a really strong foundation of just business and different types of businesses, different types of industries, different types of roles and functions. And it just gave me a really good foundation of just business in general.
Love that. And it's interesting like what you got to observe between kind of the accounting and the finance. And just in case someone's listening and they're like, accounting, finance, those are all the same. Like how would you differentiate both of those? And then would love to go down the finance path real quick.
Yeah, I mean, accounting is really, it's you're you're it's more historical, right? The accounting side of things is you're making sure the historical side financially is accurate and it's relevant, and you're abiding by certain, because I come from an audit standpoint, you're abiding by certain principles that reflect the true condition of the organization. I mean, for me, that was kind of my accounting side. Um, and then once you start getting beyond that and getting into more forecasting and budgeting and kind of analysis, that's where you get more into kind of the financial aspect, analysis. What do these numbers really tell me? How do you analyze that? How do you forecast going ahead, and how do you make financial models that make sense if you were to go into certain things? And so that's where, because originally I thought I was going to become, kind of an outsourced CFO type of thing. Because I did wear the finance and operational hats in businesses, CFO roles, operational director of finance, director of operations roles. And when I bought the Tab franchise, since I get to know their businesses so well, I thought offering them outsourced CFO services was kind of where I would lead to. But that wasn't really my passion. So I'm more of a people and operations and process person with just a finance and accounting kind of mindset, if you will. Um, so I kind of went in a tangent there. I don't know if that answers your finance and accounting question.
Yeah. It sounds like accounting's looking backwards, finance is looking forwards. And I had this my former CFO, every every leader that I've dealt with in my organizations have always thought that they were the center of the universe. The marketing person without me, we wouldn't have any sales. The operations person without me, we wouldn't be able to execute on the promises that we make for marketing. And what I used to hear from my CFO was, I can understand every aspect of the business just by looking at the numbers. And that's really kind of come through in some of the things that you've already mentioned. Like where when you're looking um at a balance sheet or you're looking at the P&L, like what are those things that are kind of telling the story, and like how are you helping kind of build a full picture just by using financial statements?
Hmm. Interesting. So I haven't had to put this finance hat on in a while because I've been out of that for so long. But I do look at it in that way, especially in our own business, right? So because I'm the finance person in our business, and so when I'm looking for is just inconsistencies, different patterns. When I'm looking at year over year, month over month, what patterns am I seeing? And it goes back to kind of what you mentioned before when in our pre-call is that I really look at the business as a body, and so when I take our our stats, our data, if you will, our pulse of certain things in our own body, it tells us how healthy we are, right? So we have our own measurements that our doctors look at. But from a business standpoint, it's the same thing. We have data that shows how healthy our organization is. And so when I look at it from a sales and marketing standpoint, I look at it from an operations standpoint, I look at it from a financial standpoint, I'm looking at patterns, I'm looking at data that shows, how healthy we are from a year to year, month to month basis. And so if there's certain irregularities or certain things that don't look right, that's where I start diving deeper, just to say, okay, what happened? What's going on here? What's the real story? What's causing that? And that to me is kind of what, when I put my financial hat on, my accounting hat on, is what I'm looking for. Those kinds of irregularities in the patterns of the data.
And are those irregularities like helping, like when you think about either the CFO or the accounting side, like are those irregularities like helping to generate the right questions to ask other leaders on the team? Or are those irregularities like helping to generate ideas? Like, let's say there's a visionary and integrator, a VI team, and they're looking at it and they're seeing some of these irregularities. Maybe their gross margins up, down, all around. Maybe sales are coming down, they're going up. Like, what what should they be thinking to themselves at that point?
Let's see. So the irregularities, that because when I say irregularities, because that was going back to audit, right? When I'm auditing things and something looks funny and it doesn't look like it's representing the true health of the business, that's when I go to that actual function and say, okay, hey, can you explain what's going on here with these numbers? Because certain things are showing me something here, but then over here showing these kinds of numbers, and those two just don't jive. And so it does bring up questions for me to ask from when I wear my audit hat. Can you help me make sense of that? Because it just doesn't make sense. So it helps me ask those questions, and it helps them really, either know what's really going on, or they truly don't know what's going on when you ask those questions. And it's very apparent when you ask those questions on when you start digging into certain things. And that's usually either they don't know what's going on because they are just, lack of a better word, just ignorant to it. They just don't understand it, or they're maybe hiding something, right? Because that's where my audit sense just starts coming up. Is, okay, are they hiding something? And that's when I start digging deeper. And so I use that. I don't use a lot of that when I'm in session with my EOS clients. I do ask a lot of questions when I see numbers that don't make sense, and I ask them, do y'all not understand? Do y'all understand why this is with your numbers? Why did it come up this way? Because usually when I when we're reviewing the quarterly numbers, right? I ask them, okay, so y'all had these goals, and y'all, there, some of them crushed them, some of them didn't, and I ask them, so what's the story? What's the story behind those numbers? How with your actuals? How did you get to those actuals compared to what you were forecasting or budgeting? Do y'all really know? What did you learn from it? Because some people at the beginning, they just say, Don, we just put that goal out there because we just put a number out there and we have no idea how we were going to achieve it, and just by luck we hit them. Okay, we really don't know how we did it, and that's when I start challenging them, say, guys, you need to know your numbers. If you're going to put a number out there, have some assumptions, have some certain expectations behind it. So that way, when you review it and you see what your actuals are, you understand, okay, this is what worked well. Our assumption here was correct. Our expectations were correct. But then all of a sudden, we missed on these things because our expectations and assumptions were incorrect. And so that way, when you start looking at it in that sense, you start understanding your body more, right? So when you're looking at your human body, right? So anytime our body tells us there's something wrong, and when there's something wrong, we usually go see a doctor. But if there's something wrong and it keeps coming up and you don't know why something's wrong, then that's really you're putting your head in the sand, and all of a sudden you develop cancer because you weren't paying attention to your symptoms and you were paying attention to the numbers of what your body was telling you. So that's why I really do. I don't I don't stress it as much as I used to because I'm no longer in the finance and accounting seat, but I do have that lens where I ask questions when I see numbers from my clients, and I ask them to see if they truly understand their numbers.
I love that, Don. And this is, I don't know whether it's just taken like 40 years for me to figure out. Like there's this adage, or there's this like philosophy out there where, and maybe it's like the startup culture, or maybe I don't know what kind of created, but there's this idea that you just throw a number out there and it's like, come hell or high water, we're gonna hit that. And for a 10-year target, I get that. Like 10-year target, there's a lot of feel. Like we're really just kind of putting a flag out there. We're just trying to get a compass heading. When 3-year picture, it's starting to get a little bit more clear, but for the 1-year target, and we just used to throw numbers out there just because at Hunt to Killer, we were 25 million. We were like, hey, we're going to do 50 million next year. The only reason we hit that was because of the pandemic. Without the pandemic, people would not have been searching for things to do inside of their homes, and we probably would have went in a very different direction at that point. And what we've been doing recently, we're self-implementing right now. But when we come up with a number, like there's at least a little bit of math that comes into that. Like, okay, this is the number. Now here are the things that we're going to do in order to hit that. When eh, like when you hear teams kind of throw out the, well, this is going to be the number and come hell or high water, is that your signal? Are you like pulling back and now like helping them with strategy or helping them think through that versus just like, oh, we're going to hit it because we're all just going to work harder this quarter?
Yeah, I kind of help facilitate that. So just I love what you said because it's absolutely true. So the 10-year target, you don't know how you're going to get there, but if it's important to you, you'll figure it out. You figure it out 3 years at a time, 1 year at a time, one quarter at a time. And then the 3-year picture, you may know how you're going to get there, but you need to be very intentional about how you're going to get there. And so I do challenge them in that 3-year picture: revenue goal, profit goal. What does the mix look like? Does your business look the same? What are you doing more of? What are you doing less of? So curate that intentionality so that this year, this 1-year plan, you know exactly what you need to do, or at least have a better, firm idea of how you're going to reach that 3-year picture, because you do have certain strategies that you need to make some changes into, maybe implement certain things, change your mix in your products and services, and so forth. So if you're not looking at it that way, to me, you're not very intentional about how you're going to get there, and it is going to be just blind luck on how you get there.
You talked a little bit about Tab, and you ran Tab. I've been a part of Vistage. Actually, I just joined EO as well. Your exposure as like having the franchise and leading this thing, like there's two big things. There's more, but there's like two things that stand out to me that kind of changed my life. Number one was from a business standpoint. Number one, EOS. Number two, Vistage. And like EOS could be representative of some sort of framework in which to operate the business, and Vistage, it could just be like a group of advisory peers that can help me work through larger issues. um, like where do you think the value from Tab and Vistage and some of these other things, and is this something that when you're working with clients that you are adamant about, like this has to be kind of a part of your suite?
Yes, because it's so important. You mentioned the impact it's had in your life. I mean, I've seen. I had Tab for 15. By the way, I just sold Tab, my Tab business, back in July. And so I need to change my website and things like that. I was still a facilitator up through October for the group that I was handing over to the new owner, because I had 4 groups and one of them I was actually facilitating myself. But Tab for 15 years, EOS for 10 years. And I've seen what it does, those two combined, what it does to organizations. I have a graphic that actually, it was kind of one of my prospecting tools. I had a graphic that shows, say this is the rate of the time, and this is the rate of change, right? So when you join a peer group, say you're a normal business, maybe your change is like this, right? But when you join a peer group, your change accelerates because your mindset as an owner starts changing. When you implement EOS, it actually deploys your leadership team to more change. So it actually, the slope changes even more. So I think those two combined are just powerful. And it really goes back to kind of the mindset that I have in looking at the business body, and also just a systems wide thing. So I take the approach of I think Stephen Covey is the one that basically kind of coined this. Is the Instead of having that mindset of do, have, be, where I'm going to do all these things so I can have this, so I can become this, right? Stephen Covey kind of flips it. He says, no, be this person, define who you want to be that person, that kind of mindset and the values that you need to have so that you can start doing things so that you can have the outcome that you want. And so I think TAB or any peer group and EOS operating system does that. It helps you define who do you want to be, who do I want to be as a leader, right? And what do I have to do to be that leader so I can have the outcome that I want? So that's kind of the owner mentality that tab helped kind of crystallize. And then from an EOS standpoint, who do we want to be as a company, and what do we need to do to get there so we can have the outcomes that we have. So and that's going back to our own bodies, right? Our own human bodies. For us to have a healthy life, we have to have that same mindset too. Who do I want to become? So I can start doing things that I need to do to have to leave a legacy that I want for my kids, for my life, and for my community. So is that be, do, have mentality that I think a peer group does and EOS does. The peer group for the owner and EOS for the leadership team and the rest of the organization.
What's interesting is you leading, chairing, facilitating a peer group, and then also bringing people into a session room. Um, like it starts with trust and getting people to open up and have the conversations. Like what you have a vast experience with this. Like how have you had or how have you like enabled um transparent, candid um conversations in both of those spaces? Like are there tactics, tools that you use to help people kind of open up?
I do, and I'm starting to realize that more and more. It's maybe one of my superpowers. But before I do that, I'm going to go back to what we talked about. The power of having a peer board and EOS is when because I have the board that I had four groups, okay, and three of them were facilitated by other facilitators and coaches, and I had my own, and in my group, 80% of my clients were both Tab and EOS, and in my other groups, maybe 50% or less. But my group would always be because we polled our members every year. Did you have record revenues? Did you have record profits? And how many employees did you add to the workforce? And every year consistently, my group, that 80% of them are running on EOS, whether it's me as their implementer or one of them actually has Jill Young as their implementer and some of them self-implemented, every year, 80 to 90% of them had either record revenue, record profit, or both, and they've added employees. So they're always in a growth trajectory. And I do believe it's because they're both in the peer group and EOS. So back to your question in terms of vulnerability, because if you know me and the people that know me, I'm a big crybaby, right? So I get pretty emotional in the meetings if it touches on something that really is meaningful to either that member or the leadership team member. I kind of empathize with them, and so I start tearing up. If I see someone crying in the room, I start crying. So, but that's one thing. But I always just set the expectations of being open and honest. I mean, every implementer does that in their own way. But I feel like I somehow connect with them because I always set that stage of openness and honesty. And it might be because as they get to know me, I'm willing to be vulnerable. And so in my check-in, sometimes I get choked up because I'm sharing a personal best, and I get choked up about it. And it just kind of brings a level of comfort to go, yeah, I can be vulnerable too, right? So I do that both in my tab groups and in EOS, and actually in my tab groups, one of the things that we do is define a personal vision. Again, it's that B, defining who that B is. Who do you want to become? And in my tab groups, I have every single one of them state their personal vision before they go into their challenge that want advice on from the group. And so that in itself, you are being vulnerable on what you want, that big picture of what you want in your life, uh, both professionally and personally, because people share a lot of things in that personal vision that's very, very personal and deep and very important to them. And so when they do that in my tab groups, then it just that setting that stage opens up with vulnerability there. Um, and in the EOS sessions, when we're going through issues, I ask them open and honest when we're building out that issues list. Open and honest. This is your chance to be open and honest and transparent. What's really bothering you? What's keeping y'all from being your best? And we're here to fight for the greater good. So I don't. It sounds simple, but it may be just how I ask it just helps them kind of just let their guards down because of just the way I ask for that and I'm transparent myself. And hopefully my clients will say that because it's it's almost it's annoying when I get so emotional and tears start coming down my face, but I just can't help it. It's just one of those things that that God designed me to really just empathize with the people around me. So I think that just brings another level of transparency with people in a room.
All right, quick break, friends. Do you find it impossible to hire and retain top sales talent? Or worse, are you paying insane recruiter fees who are all using outdated hiring processes? Yeah, I was too. At Hunt to Killer, we were spending hundreds of thousands on recruiter agency fees. And after I sold that company in 2025, I started Talent Harbor. And the whole vision here was to make sales recruiting accessible to small and medium sized businesses because the organizations that can hire and retain world class people are the ones that ultimately win. Most organizations rely on things like ZipRecruiter or LinkedIn, and they get hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes. But we find that the best salespeople are already perfectly placed somewhere else. And that's why our approach is to go after them. And we do that through a business model called recruiting as a service. We do not charge commissions. We do not have success fees. We don't have contracts. We don't have long-term engagements. And we become an extension of your team as expert sales recruiters. If you're tired of the same old recruiters and want to actually grow your sales team, check us out at talentharbor.com. That's Talent Harbor, TALENTHARBOR.com. Let's get your next sales superstar hired. I don't think I've ever heard about a personal vision. Like, and there's a lot of conversations around like what's the business vision, core values, things like that. Like, what is a personal vision, and like what is a personal vision if it's a statement? Like, what is a good personal vision look like?
Yeah, so that was one of the first things I loved about the tab process is that we do focus on the personal vision first, and that's really just like an EOS, the middle of that the EOS model is your business, right? And that's the middle is your business, and the 60 components around that is around your business. Tab really the middle of that circle is your vision, your personal vision. It really combines both personal and business because your personal vision is really your end goal that you want in your life, and the business is really just a means to that end. So it defines, what do you want your business to provide to allow you to do certain things in your life, right? But it also defines what your role in business is like. What is your ideal role in your company? When do you want to exit? How do you see that exit? You know, what do your employees look like? What does your culture look like? But also it blends in, how am I balancing my work and personal life? What am I able to do because my business is providing this? And then after, my business is providing what that is, and how do I exit? What is my exit? What do I do after I exit? So it's really combining all those and boiling it down to 100 to 150 word statement so that it, it forces you to really dive deep into what's most important to you. And when you have that crystallized, just like in the business, the VTO is the greater good. Then for an owner, that personal vision is that's the greater good for them, for their family, for their community. And so that's where, as a coach, I help them drive towards that.
I love that. I've never one, I don't have a personal vision. I mean, I could come up with one. I mean, I just haven't documented one. And I think to a certain extent, I mean, we were talking about intentionality earlier in this conversation, and I feel like I've kind of gone through life of just like more, like more growth, more this, more that, whatever the case may be. And that's why I love this concept of a personal vision. Um, is a personal now, obviously, like no one would be able to control when in their lives they put a personal vision together. Have you seen though that like a personal vision will then either transform a business vision or a company vision for that owner, or do you normally see like it's more of a definition of like why the company exists, or the vehicle to achieve the things that are in the personal vision?
Yeah, so it's both, because usually, when people came to me for tab, they were frustrated, right? Because they were working like a dog, and the business wasn't providing what they wanted out of the business. And so, and it was taking over their life. It was their life, right? And so that's why, when in the beginning process of our process with tab is, well, what do you want your life to look like? What is it that's important to you? What's ideal for you? And then when you define that, and that includes personally and professionally, when you define that, then we say, okay, well, in order to do that, your business has to provide certain things for that. So again, your business becomes a means to that end. But it does impact the there's when you look at the VTO, from an owner standpoint, that VTO exists because the owner has in their head a personal vision in their mind defined. It may not be in writing, but they have something in their head. This is what I want my business to provide, so I can do these things personally with my family and things like that. Now, why not write it down? I mean, write it down. Put your personal vision down, so that way you're very intentional about your personal vision. Because a lot of things that we ask about that is going, what's important to you? Is like, for example, some people put in their personal vision, hey, I want to be home every night for dinner with my family. That's part of their personal vision. Or you know, I want to be able to vacation at least so many times a year. I want to be able to be old enough to be physically fit, old enough to travel with my grandchildren when I get older. Whatever it is that's important to them from a personal standpoint. Because sometimes people put in there, when you look at the business, they say, okay, I want my business operating in such a way that it doesn't need me, on a day-to-day basis. I'm working only 3 days a week, um, whatever that is. So it's just really defining what you want to be very intentional about. And that's what I love about that process, because I'm actually writing a book now, because when I see what we did with Tab, and what I see what we did with EOS, or to continue to do with EOS, it's the same concepts. That's the be, do, have concept that Stephen Covey mentioned. Be, define who do you want to be as a company, as a business owner, as an individual. Do, start doing what you need to do, take action, have the right habits, so that you can have the outcome that you want, so you can actually fulfill that personal vision, or that VTO, that vision traction organizer. So it's just these life principles, and there's statistics on this. Is if you write things down, there's 42% chance of higher achievement rate of that success rate, 42%. And there's some studies behind that. And then, not only if you write it down, if you share it with people that you really trust, because there's another stat that shows, if you share it with people that you just put it out in the world, and you don't trust it, you're just kind of putting it out there, it actually reduces the effectiveness of it. But if you share it with people that you trust, like a peer board, or your leadership team, or your spouse, or your partner, that increases the chances as well. But not only that, once you share it, because sometimes people share it only once and they don't have a regular pulse. When you share it with a regular review, a regular pulse, which is what we did with Tab, what we do with EOS, that increases the chances of success from anywhere from 75% to 96%. So, and there's studies that show that. So when you have those habits of, okay, write it down, Be very clear on what it is that you want. Share it with people that you care and trust, that you feel like is going to hold you accountable, right? It's your accountability partners. And then have a regular review pulse to see, okay, how are we doing? How am I doing? What do I need to change? Be open and honest with me. What's keeping me from getting there? That just increases the chances of success. And that's what I've been doing for the last 15 years, whether it's with the owners or with the leadership team. And that's why I think it's so powerful. It's very simple, powerful, but as we all know, simple is not easy. It takes a lot of intentionality to do that, to make sure that we do have the right habits. Going back to the lens that I look at as a business body, in order for us to have a healthy lifestyle for us in our own personal body, we have to have better habits. We we kill ourselves with bad habits. And as a business body, we have bad habits as a business body too. So we have to have good, healthy habits as a business body.
When you think about the personal vision, it is it also like the documentation of other things? Like is your thing like have a personal vision? Is it almost like a VTO, or are you like get the personal vision down and like that will do 80% of the work?
Well, that personal vision does become like the VTO for that owner, because your coach is there always bringing up your personal vision in the coaching sessions. And as I said in my peer groups in Tab, all my members stated their personal vision at every meeting. So they always are speaking out loud to their peers, and their peers would call them out on it because they would do things that were against that personal vision. And they would say, Michael, if this is important to you, why are you focused on this thing so much? How's that gonna get you to that personal vision? And so it increases the accountability, and that's why I think when when I have in my group, and when they're both in EOS and Tab, it just increases that chance of they're fulfilling their company vision through their leadership team and the rest of the organization, but they're also fulfilling their personal vision. They're living the life that they want. It's the EOS life, the EOS life that we all want our clients to have. But sometimes the EOS life becomes too much on their company side of things. But the EOS life also is a personal life for them. And in my mind, you have to define your own personal vision on what that looks like, so that your business really provides a means to that end. Because too many times the business becomes the end, and the business becomes their identity, and they're lost when they sell their business, is because they never really define what their personal vision is.
Is this something that you find that's kind of exclusive for the owners, the founders, the visionaries, or is your do you believe that this is a good tool that the entire senior leadership team can use?
Anybody, anybody. I mean, you can be an individual contributor, you can be a manager, you can be senior leadership. You need to define what you want, what's important to you in your life. And there's a lot of, actually, Michael Hyatt has his own personal vision exercise. There's a lot of exercises out there that would help you define personal visions. We just had a specific one through Tab. Um, and I think it's important for anyone, even if you're not, if entrepreneurship or ownership is not in your cards, you have to define what's important to you in terms of your career. What does your career look like? What do you want to be able to do as you grow more and more skills in your career, and how does that provide for your family? What does your family look like? What does your personal life look like? I think it's important for anyone, and for me, it really is, because there's a proverbs scripture that says, "Without vision, people perish." Right. So that applies to anyone. If we don't have our own personal vision, our own mindset of who we want to be, who we want to become, then we're rudderless. Right. People perish. What Solomon meant by that, King Solomon, who's say is the wisest person in the world, is that when he said perish by that, doesn't mean they necessarily die. It's just they don't have guidelines or guideposts to guide their life. So they're always just being blown by the wind, and their purpose is not clear. So they don't have a clear purpose that they're moving towards. But when you have that clear personal vision, then you have a bigger purpose that you're trying to achieve. And that should guide everything that you do. And to me, that's what creates a discipline that we need to do in our lives to have the good habits, is when that personal vision is crystal clear. That be do have again.
I love it. Is there a frequency, like do personal visions evolve over time? Like is it like every 5 years, every 10 years, and like what frequency is like, I don't know, should people be looking and reflecting and maybe modifying?
Yeah, so I always encourage my clients to look like 10 years out, at least 5 to 10 years out, right? Hopefully closer to that 10-year mark. Because going back to, Gino also talks about it as well, your 10-year thinking, right? Um, and what I love about it is these things that I've done, there's so many common threads in what I do with peer groups in the US. Um, and so it does change because sometimes, and just like the VTO changes, sometimes we go through that vision building 1 and 2 process, but then after year 1 we look at that 3-year picture and it's like, man, that 3-year picture was not very good. And so we need to create a new 3-year picture or just kind of tweak it a little bit, because now that we know what we know and we've been in EOS for a year, that 3-year picture might not even be as a stretch anymore, or it might just not be. We've learned about each other so much now that we know that that's not us. That's not who we want to become 3 years from now. Um, and so it does evolve. And so, like for example, I had one client, over 10 years ago, and I use his example all the time when I do personal vision exercises and workshops. It's part of his personal vision was he wanted to develop a leadership team, um, that has his back, that wouldn't allow him to fail, that he would have kids, and he would be a great father because he didn't have kids at that point in time. Uh, that the business is growing and helping sustain his standard of living, but also the people that he employs, and that he is in his dream home where his parents can, if they need to be, can be living with them, and they live in a community where he can kind of with a short drive or walk or in a golf cart go to restaurants and things like that. And so 10 years after that, he invites us to his dream home, and his peer group to his dream home, and we started his tour at his foyer, and he pointed at me and said, "Don, this dream house would not have been possible if it weren't for you." And I told him, "Man, that's way too much on me. You did the hard stuff. I gave you a system that we reviewed every year, every month. You define your personal vision. You made it happen because you were very intentional. Your peers helped you do that because you were speaking that out loud to them, and they're holding you accountable to it. So it was a system. It was the habits that helped them get there, and that's why it's so important to. I mean, and that's what happens with that VTO. That's what happens with that personal vision. When you're very intentional about it, you will get there. You'll find a way to get there. It'll create the discipline and the habits to get there. That's why EOS is so powerful. That's why peer groups are so powerful.
One more question. I feel like we've gone. This is like super fascinating. That's why I've stuck to this personal vision thread. One more question on the personal vision thread. Do you think it would be a good exercise as a senior leadership team to have everybody do their personal vision and share it with other people in the senior leadership team, or is it meant for like peers and outside of the company or close friends and family?
You know, one of my clients asked me that, and I told them I don't think it would be hurtful, if they're really truly bonded as a leadership team, and they're willing to be vulnerable and open and honest about what's really important to them. To me, in my mind, that really helps understand what drives them, and how that as a team they can work together in helping fulfill their own personal visions, and hopefully it's within the company, right? Because sometimes those personal visions might define that, what, I may want to have my own business. And that's okay, because in our 3-year picture, when we go through that 3-year picture exercise, we always ask, what does your role look like 3 years from now? What are you doing more of? What are you doing less of? And usually that's the time when some people say, I want to be retired by this time. And that way they put it out there, and then you start planning around that. So the company's not blindsided by it. Hey, this guy wants to leave at some point in time. We need to start building the bench strength behind that person to make sure that we have a good succession plan, transition strategy. And so when people understand everyone else's personal vision, then everything's out on the table. There's no hidden agendas, and you're a more functional, healthy team
Love that.
when that happens.
Love that. By the way, that just made our issues list. Because I love it. I love it. Like it to me, it serves like so many different purposes. Like for one, and you said this is like if you have a team that like truly gels and can be open, honest, and transparent, then this is almost like another unique exercise that helps bring it even closer. Um, yeah, I love what you just said right there. So it just made our issues list while we were talking.
You know what? Something just entered my mind, and I may get in trouble for this because it's not EOS pure. But I've had a client for 6 years, and they're a very small leadership team. They're four, and they're very, very close and tight knit. And we've shared tears together, we share faith together. We've really bonded as a group, not just them together, but just with me too. And so in our annual meeting, one of the annuals that we did, I really I went through the personal vision exercise with them that I do with certain clients and workshops that I do, and they loved it. They loved it, and their homework was to create the personal vision. I just kind of took them through a draft of it, but they believe it's going to really help them as a team, and not just professionally. It's going to help them personally, really define what's important to them. So.
I love that. I might be following up with you for the how you effectively put one together.
Oh, by the way, so now kind of the second half of that story of that client with the dream home, and we got invited. That was back in 2024 is when we had that dinner. Now his new personal vision is that, and by the way, he's got kids now. He's got kids now. He's in his dream home. He's built up a great leadership team because he's running on EOS. I'm his implementer, and they're achieving all sorts of things. His new dream, his new personal vision is really. I wish I could read it. It's in my head. But part of it is going to. But that was by the time he was 40. He wanted this, and he hit it. He hit it when he hit 40, because he defined that when he was 30 years old. Now beyond 40, part of it is what's really cool is he wants to go to Scotland and play golf there with his kids, because he's got a son that he's kind of just starting to get playing golf. But it's funny because he's very intentional about it. Now that that's written in his head, he's making sure that his son is going to golf games with him, and he's got this golf tournament that he does to honor his dad who's passed. And this time around, his son was involved in that golf tournament. So it's just really neat how all this, with intentionality, and when things are written down, that your day to day, week to week, things that you do is all aligned towards that. So anyway, just wanted to share that.
I love that. One more question on that line of thinking. Is this should you refer like is this somewhere that you write it down and you put it prominently that way you're going to see it every single day? Is this something that like, every Monday you look at? Like what how do you think about that?
So with my clients, we saw it twice a month. We saw it once a month because they actually share it in their peer group, and then in my coaching sessions with them, which is in between the monthly board meetings, I would have it in front of me, and I would dive into it if I felt like they need to be reminded of what's important to them if they're off in some tangents, and they were doing things that were inconsistent with it. So um, we have our own personal visions here in my organization. So there's three of us here. My wife is in the business, and my sister-in-law, who's my wife's sister, is also in the business. We had the contractors when we had the tab groups, but now that I'm focused on EOS, we have just the three of us, and we all have personal visions. Um, and we probably need to refer to it a lot more often. We don't refer to it as often as I advise my clients to. So that may be put on my issues list, is for me to review our personal visions more often.
I I love it. Um what's Okay, so someone just listened to this whole thing and they're like, I need some Don in my life. Like there's gonna be some personal vision, there's gonna be expert implementation. What is the best way that they can get a hold of you?
Probably an email. So my email is don@jdsmenterprises.com. So that is my parent company that I had Tab under and EOS under. It's a leadership development company. We actually have another product called Next Generation Leaders that goes to another level of mid managers, developing them as leaders. So Don at jdsmenterprises.com. So that's probably the best way.
Awesome. Don, thank you so much for, like, we covered, first we went down the accounting and the finance and like how to look at balance sheets and profit and loss statements and what questions, how to assess, all the way to like personal vision. I just felt like today was so impactful. So I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time and coming on.
No, thanks for having me. It's my privilege.
Awesome. All right. We'll catch you next time.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.